I think it's worth up front just saying thanks to the committee for the programming committee this year. That includes Julie Kress, Scotty McDaniel, Chris Coate, and then the many kind of other staff people and administrators that underwrite that whole project. The full slate, I think, is, I would hate to miss someone, so I'm not going to name them all off. Tonight, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest, Alastair Philip Wiper. Alastair is a photographer based in Copenhagen, Denmark. In addition to working commercially for brands like Google and Nikon, his work is regularly featured in publications like Wired, Vice, Scientific American, The Guardian. I'm kind of obsessed with this incredibly long list of things, so here we go. Adidas, Art Basel, Icon Magazine, New Scientist, Vice, Men's Health, Bloomberg, Wallpaper, Esquire, Scientific American, Popular Science. Like, it's kind of an endless list of incredible things that Alastair's been up to. His prints are included in the collections at the Design Museum in London and the Royal Institute of British Architects. He's produced several books, including Unintended Beauty, which is on sale by the student IA Collaborative student organization this evening. Sorry, I lost my spot. The Art of the Impossible. Alastair's new long-term project, which we got to work on a little bit today, or I was invited along the ride, if you will, today for a bit. It's called How I Learned to Stop Worrying, which includes photographing Oak Ridge National Lab, the Nevada test site, among other strange places in America. Okay, so that's the stuff that one should say about Alastair. But I think in perhaps maybe a too straightforward way, we might say that he photographs industry, science, and architecture. But a quick survey of the photos themselves, I think, quickly shows that he's up to far more than just that. I think first we notice the content of the photos, as Alastair himself describes, from giant shipyards in South Korea to particle accelerators in Switzerland to sex robot factories in California, among others, many others. Among the mix of these far-flung environments, I think we start to glean a kind of techno-cultural commentary about the wild assemblages of contemporary human life and scientific study and industrial production, in which I would like to add that architecture in the built environment is always a prominent figure. When we see Alastair's work, we might think of natural allies, or contemporaries, if you will. Andreas Gursky comes to mind, or Alex McLean, or Edward Bertinsky, photographers who I think allow us or help us to see that which we've never seen, or to re-see that which we've forgotten how to see. I think Alastair fits very, very comfortably among them. In philosophy, we might think of Jean Baudrillard, or Manuel de Landa, or Jane Bennett, especially in the ways that they interrogate systems of things or objects as vehicles through which to understand everything else. In more journalistic pursuits, we might think of Jeff Menard or Anthony Bourdain or Radiolab, who put curiosity and wonder into the normative and the mundane. But Alastair's work, I think, produces a kind of immediate and communicable language through which we can study and understand contemporary situations we find ourselves in. The often technologically mutant, media-saturated contemporary human experience that's always inextricably wound into the built environment. And it's increasingly made up of assemblages of human and non-human systems and processes. Perhaps, I think, maybe more than any other guest, Alastair's work speaks for itself. So in recognition of the inadequacy of any of the words that I'm about to say, I think we should just turn it over to Alastair. So please join me in welcoming Alastair Wiper.
Thanks a lot, Mark. That was a very nice introduction. Can you all hear me okay? Is my microphone? Yes, okay. Great to be here in Tennessee. Who is from Tennessee here? Okay, quite a lot of you actually. I've never been here. It's great. So far, one day. It's been really good. About some of my work and some of the themes that go on in my work. I think Mark has just said quite a lot, actually, of my presentation, but no, it's all right. I've got a bit more than that. But I'm going to start off by saying who I am. Who am I? This is going to be good. I spent a lot of time working on that, so I hope you appreciate it. It's all downhill from here. This is me as a 6-year-old. I grew up in a place called Guildford. It's about half an hour south of London. And I went to university in Southampton, which is on the south coast of England. And I finished my bachelor in philosophy when I was 21 years old. And I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I just knew I wanted to get out of England and go traveling. So I traveled for a few years, and I ended up in a skiing resort, working as a ski bum in France, in a place called Avoriaz. And there I met a Danish woman who took me back to Denmark, and that was 18 years ago, and I've got kids and a house and a different Danish woman, but that's how I ended up in Denmark. When I got there, I had no idea what to do. I was working as a cook, as a chef, and that's my other big passion in life, is food. But I didn't want to be a chef for the rest of my life. I wanted to find something more enjoyable, maybe. So I was looking for what to do with my life. I was 24 years old. And I kind of stumbled into Photoshop and Illustrator. And I'd never done anything creative before, and I just decided it seemed fun. So I taught myself how to use those programs, and then I got a job working as a graphic designer and thought, okay, I'm going to be a graphic designer. A couple of years after that, I picked up a camera as part of my job. And a couple of years later, I thought, I'm going to be a photographer now. And I taught myself everything everything about photography, and I built a dark room in my apartment and developed my own films and bought loads of old cameras and made loads of kind of scratchy black and white arty stuff. And when I decided I wanted to be a photographer, I thought, right, what am I going to take pictures of? Because I'm not going to make a living doing this. I just had a kid. I had to think about the future. How am I going to be a photographer that is going to have a career where I'm going to see amazing things, and I'm going to travel and get paid as well? Portrait, there was a lot of portrait photographers. There's fashion, I tried a bit, I didn't really like that. And then one day I saw the work of these photographers that were industrial photographers working in the 50s and 60s. And they worked for big oil companies and big companies that wanted to show off like their oil refineries. And in the days when oil companies they were really proud of their oil refineries, and they wanted to say to the world, hey, look at this amazing stuff we built. Buy your oil from us, because we know what we're doing. And yeah, that's kind of out of fashion now. People want, now they're kids skipping through fields with the sun going down in the background and that kind of thing for an oil company. But I just saw this work, and I thought, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to build up a portfolio doing this stuff, and then I'm going to travel around the world, and I'm going to go and I'm going to see amazing stuff, and I'm going to photograph it, and that's it. And that's what I did. So I started off trying to get into anywhere I could. So I called like Toyota customer service line and said, hey, I'm a photographer. Can I come and photograph your factory, please? And they kind of laughed at me. So I had to learn how to find the right person, how to convince them of what I wanted to do, to let me in to different places. So I'm going to move on to the first theme of my work that I'm going to talk about, and that is accidental aesthetics. So when I come to places, one of the things that I'm first drawn to is I love to go to places where things are made for purely functional purposes, and they're not, the colors that are used are kind of arbitrary. Someone has decided, oh, this needs to be a color, well, let's paint it blue, or let's paint this yellow. And then like kind of like a treasure hunt, like what is it that I like here, and what is interesting. And I would say the first layer of my work is usually kind of graphics and colors and maybe not understanding what it is that you're looking at. Because I want to draw people in with that, and then I want to let it be something deeper. So this is from CERN in Switzerland, where they have the Large Hadron Collider. And this is actually one of the first places I got like a lucky break. I booked myself on like a public tour, and then I wrote to the press office and said, can I see something else? I'm a photographer. And they said, yeah, we've booked you on a tour with an engineer, and he's going to take you around to loads of different places. And then when I met the engineer, he told me, next time you want to come back, just call me and don't go through the press office, and I'll take you anywhere you want to go. So I went back 3 or 4 times, and then they actually ended up buying all of the pictures that I took and commissioning me to take some more pictures. So that worked out really well. But this I found lying at the back of like a warehouse gathering dust, and this is part of the Atlas detector, which is one of the big detectors on the Large Hadron Collider, which is the world's largest particle accelerator. And they used this, they built it out of wood to test before they installed the real thing how the wiring was supposed to work. And then they moved it to the back of a big warehouse, and it's sitting there forever now, I guess. This is a sausage factory in Denmark. Yeah, maybe there's a bit of a contrast between finding out how the universe started and a sausage factory. But in my world, they kind of, they work together. You know, I'm amazed that machines that build sausages, that make sausages, you know, the whole process and infrastructure that goes into making really mundane things is pretty much as interesting for me as trying to find out, you know, the meaning of the universe or where the universe came from. And this is just, you know, this is like a sculpture in a gallery or something like that, but it's freshly stuffed salami. This is a textile mill in the north of England, and these are yarns that are going on to like a big thing that's going to be turned into a fabric. This is the Absolute Vodka distillery in Sweden. Does anyone know what Absolute Vodka is? That's big in America as well, right? So all 99 million liters of Absolute Vodka go through all of these pipes here. All of the vodka that is made for the whole world goes through here. And to me, this is just like a kind of sculpture. It's a kind of ugly sculpture, but there's a lot of ugliness. There's a lot of beauty in ugliness. There's a very kind of fine line. Like, a lot of people would not want to live next door to this sculpture. And I can understand that. But I think there's an interesting contrast between this, what is, you know, really ugly, and what is beautiful. This is a radio anechoic chamber in Denmark. And this is a room that they use to test antennae for satellites in space, so that they can talk to each other. So all of these spikes, they stop radio waves around so they can simulate the conditions of space. And in the old days, apparently, they used to, there's quite a lot of these rooms around the world, they used to make them black, all of the spikes, but the people that worked in them said they got too depressed working in there, so all of the manufacturers started to make them in blue. They just chose blue. And now all of these rooms around the world are blue. So the next theme I'm going to talk about is fantasy. When I visit these places, I get really kind of blown away by the things that I see that humans are creating and building, because I don't really understand how it works or how they do it or how they organize themselves like ants to kind of pass ideas from one person to another person to build machines that make sausages or crash particles into each other. And so what I want to do when I go to see these places is try to kind of get that sense of like amazement or wonder pictures, so that when people see it, they also get a feeling of what I feel when I'm there. And I grew up on reading like Roald Dahl. Does anyone know who Roald Dahl is? Like, he wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and H.G. Wells, who wrote The Time Machine and War of the Worlds. Like, and these kind of machines and stories that they talk about, I get reminded of when I visit these places. And when I started out, I think I wanted to just do kind of documentary photography. And as I did it more and more, I wanted to put more of my like fantasy of what I saw in these places into the pictures. And I'm not lying or pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. I'm not distorting anything, but I'm very conscious of putting kind of my angle and my very carefully kind of choosing the composition to what I want to be in the picture and what I don't want to be in the picture. This is a machine called the Octopus at the Playmobil factory in Malta. Playmobil is like Lego, I'm sure, and the US as well. This machine sucks plastic pellets around the factory to injection molding machines, where they make 5 million pieces of Playmobil every day. Sorry. This is a building from a skiing resort called Avoriaz, which happens to be a skiing resort I lived in when I met the Danish. And this is a very special architecture in this skiing resort. It was built in the 60s, and the whole place is built in this kind of style out of wood, and it's meant to represent the mountains, so it kind of blends into the mountains. In the daytime, it can look a little bit kind of grey, and a lot of people don't really like it. It's a bit weird. But when I got there, I could see that there was a way I wanted to, the way I could see it, and I had to find a way to photograph it to like accentuate what I saw, which was like a kind of horror film or something like that. So I became convinced that the guy who designed the whole place was one architect that designed the whole resort. His name is Jacques Lebreu. And I was convinced that he'd been inspired by this film called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is like a 1930s horror film. And then I made an exhibition of all the pictures that I took in Copenhagen. And we flew him over from France, the architect, and he's still around. He's in his 80s. And he didn't speak any English, so we had to have like a translator. And then I asked him, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, were you inspired by it? And he said no, he wasn't at all. But it inspired me. So this is a solar furnace in the French Pyrenees, and this is a building which is used to test materials for nuclear reactors and for space re-entry and that kind of thing. So what happens is, where I'm taking the picture from, there's going kind of on a slope like this, there's a load of mirrors that follow the sun, and then they reflect it onto this big mirror, which reflects it onto a point in the middle of that kind of grey building about this size, when it gets to 3,500 degrees. And this is also one of the first things when I started doing this project. I think it was one of the first things I photographed, and I think I saw it on some internet page of like the weirdest buildings in the world, 10 weirdest buildings in the world or something. And I saw it and I said I had to go there. And to me it looks like something from Thunderbirds, or something that comes out of the ground and shoots a laser at an asteroid or something. This is called the Large Space Simulator. It's in the Netherlands at the test center of the European Space Agency. So what this does is a vacuum chamber where you put a spacecraft in the middle. So to give it some scale, this is a ladder where a regular person would climb up that ladder. So it's pretty big. then they suck out all of the air and they chill it down to the temperature of space. And then there's some really powerful lamps that are coming up here and shining on this big mirror that shines it on one side of the spacecraft as the other side is really cold. And then they rotate it round to see how it's going to react when it's in space and it's getting the hot sun on one side and the colder space on the other side. Yeah, and it looks like the eye of some really evil robot or something is living in there. Next theme I'm going to talk about my work is humanity. I was once at a similar kind of event, and do you hate people? Because there's no people in your pictures. And so I'm prepared for this. And there's, if you look really closely, there's a man at the top up there. And actually, when I printed it really big, I found that there's actually another man that's hidden in there. You can't really see him. This is a container ship being built in South Korea. It was the biggest in the world. I think there's one that's slightly bigger now. And when it's completed, it can hold 18,000 containers and 745 million bananas. But in all seriousness, I do actually take quite a lot of pictures of people. I'm often commissioned to take pictures of people, and I often take pictures of people when I'm out doing my projects. But it's true that when I choose pictures for my books or my works that I consider, more like artworks, I rarely include pictures of people and portraits. And this guy's question got me thinking about why that is and what my relationship to people is through my work. And I kind of came to the conclusion that my work is all about people. It's just another way of representing what humans do through their needs and their desires and the things that they build to provide for them, and the infrastructures that they build to provide for themselves and answer their questions about the origins of life and that kind of thing. And when we're talking about desires, this is a dildo factory in Hollywood. So this is a factory that is producing. I put all my numbers here because I can't remember any numbers. So 750,000 dildos per week. And when I was making my last book, I had a lot of subjects in there from food to medicine to power, and I wanted to put a sexual element into the book. I needed to represent this side of humanity. So I knew I had to go to a dildo factory, which I did, and then I made that kind of into a little project of its own. Actually, I've spent a lot of time wondering what these they were almost entirely Hispanic women that didn't speak any English, what they tell their families when they go home about what they've been doing all day. This is the Future Consumer Lab in Denmark, and this is a laboratory with a series of rooms where they test people's emotional reaction to food and what people are going to want to eat in the future and why they like what they like. And this person here is eating probably a Danish rye bread with sausage on it or something like that. But she's got a virtual reality headset on, so she's in the south of France with the waves lapping against the shore, and there's a waiter in black tie, and then they're going to ask her afterwards, how did your sausage with rye bread taste? Did it taste better than it does normally? In a nutshell. This is a sex robot, the head of a sex robot in the USA, also in California, and the company that makes them, they make sex dolls, and they decided to venture out into robotics. The guy that started the company he started off in special effects, and he wanted to make a more realistic mannequin for shop windows, and he did that. And then people started to ask if he could make it so they could have sex with it, and so he did. And then he built his company on that. And then he decided he wanted to get into robotics. So this doll, this head can kind of say basic things like, hello, you look so hot today, and stuff like that. But a lot of the people that buy these dolls are kind of lonely men whose wives might have died or that kind of thing. And if you're already really happy with a doll that doesn't say anything, then I think the theory is you're going to be extra happy with one that can say anything at all. My final theme I'm going to talk about is morality. And I think that in a way, like all of the work that I do, all of the things that I photograph, have kind of a moral aspect, because it's technology and infrastructures that have got us to where we are today, and it's got us all the amazing things that we have in our life, and it's also maybe ruining the planet at the same time. And is this technology going to come and save us from all of the things that are going wrong with the world, or do we need to just stop everything we're doing right now? And a lot of the things that I photograph, or the things that I like to photograph, are things that people get a reaction to, or get where I don't know the answer myself about what the right way to consume is, or what the right way to behave in certain situations is, and I like taboo subjects that get a bit of a reaction. So this is a slaughterhouse in Denmark. This is one of the largest slaughterhouses in the world. They kill 100,000 pigs a week in the slaughterhouse. And it was built in 2004, the slaughterhouse, and they built it with like a corridor going down the middle where you could see, it's like a viewing corridor, so you could see the whole process from the pigs going in to them getting killed, and there's a much more bloody area than this as well. And people are kind of, a lot of people that eat meat get a reaction to this picture that they think, oh, whoa, that didn't realize there's so much death there. But they're happy to kind of carry on eating the meat. I eat meat, and I didn't really have a problem going to this place. I didn't think it was like nice. But I also think that as someone that eats meat, I should be prepared to see this. And I'm constantly questioning myself if I should be eating meat. It's like a kind of, it's an ongoing discussion, or at least should we be eating that much meat? Maybe is more the point, that there's so much. This is not something I'm like really vocal about or anything like that. It's just an interesting question that I kind of have going. This is a shoe factory, Adidas shoe factory in Indonesia. And get back to my numbers, 10,000 people work in the factory, and they make 75,000 pairs of shoes a day. And a lot of people, when they see this picture, I think they automatically assume that it's kind of a sweatshop in Asia somewhere. And I'm not an investigative kind of photographer, so my job wasn't to go there and see what was wrong, but I've been in quite a lot of factories, and it looked pretty fine to me, the conditions. But I think we're used to thinking in the West, especially in Europe, of factory work as being like not a good job. and when we see people standing doing the same thing all the time, then I think we get an idea, a perception that it's not really good, and we want to bring it back to Europe production, and we want to bring it close to home and stuff like that. But there's whole communities that are kind of built on this production here in Asia now. So again, my own kind of questions that I'm asking myself are: do we need this many pairs of shoes? And what is the right way to get our shoes? Yeah. We don't need this many pairs of shoes, by the way, I don't think. We're back to the sex doll factory. So they make about 30, 35 sex dolls a month in this place, and you can choose every aspect of your sex doll, like how big or small everything should be. And the company has come under some criticism for kind of perpetuating like an image of women or like a body shape which isn't healthy. And I asked the guy that had the company about that, like, what do you say when people say that? And he said, if I made a frumpy middle-aged woman, no one would buy my dolls. And yeah, I will leave that there. I'm not going to comment any more on that. This is my last picture for today. This is the National Ignition Facility in USA, at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in California. And this is leading on to the new project that I'm working on. And while I'm here now, I'm going to Oak Ridge, and then I'm also going to some other sites in the US. But the project as a whole is about the word nuclear and all of the many meanings of this very loaded word, from politics to culture to energy to weapons. And this is maybe one of the biggest kind of like moral technology questions that humans have ever faced. That the most amazing minds in the world came together and in an insanely short period of time during the Second World War managed to build probably the most amazing thing humans have ever built. And it was used to kill a lot of people. And it's been kind of a symbol of death and fear for such a long time. And does it work? Does this mutually assured destruction principle, that if we all have it, then no one will use it, does this work? I don't know. I haven't made my mind up on that yet, but I think it's amazing that we haven't blown ourselves up yet, or that someone hasn't accidentally blown someone else up, or blown themselves up, or because it's crazy the things that could have gone wrong during the Cold War, when there were missiles everywhere just flying around the world. But you know, at Oak Ridge they have the graphite reactor, and that was used to enrich plutonium during the Manhattan Project, and then it switched to making medical isotopes to save lives. So there are so many kind of interesting contradictions and contrasts in this nuclear question, and that's what I'm kind of getting absorbed with at the moment. That was it.
Sure.
No problem.
I neglected to mention this earlier, but it was our plan all along that Alastair would present in a more brief fashion than we're used to, and that Alastair and I would sustain some form of discussion to start off the Q&A time, if that makes sense. I'm going to crank the lights up. That's better. Okay. Thanks, Alastair. I just want to start by kind of reporting from the field from today a little bit to give you a little breather, but also maybe just to give context to what we were up to today, or what you were up to and what I got to witness, if you will. We spent the day at Oak Ridge National Lab, in which Alastair got like an astonishing level of access beyond what I could ever imagine getting at Oak Ridge National Lab. Yeah, put that on.
You carry on, sorry.
And so I found myself today thinking, we had been there about 30 or 45 minutes. And Alastair had undergone harness training to get strapped into a lift, like a lift that was going to be lifted off the ground. And we got that checked off the list. Then we went to the high-flux isotope reactor, which is one of the two most important research reactors on the campus and one of the most secure places on the campus. And he was hoisted in the kind of gantry lift, if you will, that they wheeled in from outside, and hovered over a pool of water in which they put spent nuclear reactor fuel. So, we're there for 45 minutes. Alastair got into the U.S. yesterday, and he walked into Oak Ridge National Lab and got on a gantry lift, and they put him over the water, where no one can go. And we had to go to a safety meeting in which Alastair was. It was confirmed that Alastair would not be near any dangerous radiation sources, at least enough to kill you and things like that. Protocol was read from pages in a book, things like this. And so that had me thinking this morning, and I was just, as I was perusing the work, trying to think through it and frame it, for such a conversation, that there's a logistics to the work. There's a way that the work happens, or a how that work happens. And then there's the content of the work, or the what or the why, which is, I think, what you spoke to more often here. And so I was kind of wondering about that contrast. I'm not sure they're mutually exclusive, but how do you choose to work on things? What do you choose to work on? And are those mixed for you? Do you set out with what to photograph or look at, and then follow it up with how, or is that sometimes reversed?
When I made this book, Unintended Beauty, it took me 8 years to make that book. And I just knew I was working towards a kind of general look into the way that things are made behind the scenes in all sorts of different ways. So anything was on the table for that, and I was just trying to get access to anywhere that I could, and I would pick up a pen and say, where was that made, and then start to research, and then try and get into the pen factory. And a lot of the time, I still work like that. Basically, it's just stumbling across stuff and thinking, okay, where was this made? Where did this come from? I would say I'm more specific now in that I'm kind of working on a few particular themes that I'm trying to work to investigate more, certain particular themes. So I'm going after places that I think I will get what I want from in that kind of theme. But the basic way of working is to just look at what's around me, look at the news, look at and research. Yeah, Google is my best friend. So if I see something, if I have an idea, or if I read something on the news that I think is interesting, that makes me think, okay, there could be a place I could visit, then I will just start to research on where that place is and how I can get access.
Can you, elaborate on the getting access part? I mean, you have a way of asking questions, just asking obvious questions, to which the answer might be no, but that no one has ventured to ask yet.
Yeah, to be honest, some people just get what I want to do, and they get it straight away when I write to them, and they kind of open and they say, okay, yeah, this sounds interesting, and then it can go pretty surprisingly smoothly. Like Oak Ridge, for instance. I had a really good contact there, but the contact that I got from there was from the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, who I just emailed. I found the contact that I needed to get to, and that has been a big part of my kind of learning process, or my art is like figuring out who the person is and how do I pitch what I want to do to them, and get them to say yes. And so I find the right person. I found the right person at Lawrence Livermore, and they just wrote back and said, yeah, this sounds great. You can come and you can photograph it. And then when I'd been there and I'd met them, I started to ask about other places that I could go, and she shared her contacts with me. So I had a contact. But when I wrote to Oak Ridge, they also were immediately, they've got a good communications department who gets what I want to do, and was really good at setting everything up. Other times, people just don't get it. Or they have what I would say from a selfish point of view is a bad communications department, because they don't want to let me in, they don't want to have a discussion about it, they're just kind of like, no, or don't answer. That's, that does happen as well, but there's always another place that I can go. So if I can't get into one place, then there's another place, and then I'll find someone that will let me in.
Yeah, I think just the persistence, like like even just watching you interface with ORNL this time, both today and in the leading up to it, it's really interesting to just track, like asking, hey, can you turn the lights off? And yeah, the answer is yes. Like no one would have ventured to turn the lights off in the high flux isotope reactor, but it was possible. They brought electricians in and they shut the lights off just for the photographs. But let's.
Sometimes I've come all the way to Tennessee. I can just ask if they can turn the lights off. Sometimes right. Sometimes it is like you just have. They can just say no, and then I say, okay, all right, I'll live with that. Be nice. It helps if you're be nice. I try to be nice.
Yeah. on the quality of getting it or not getting it, I think it's really the things you see, or the things that you allow others to see through the photographs, are in some cases about seeing that which we would have never seen anyway, like getting access to things that we may never have access to, or that we would be so far flung that we'd never get there. The other part of it is just re-seeing or being able to see anew those things which we'd forgotten to see. So like the normal, the mundane, etc., which works very, very, like that's one feature of the work at large. But then when we're talking to people like scientists, engineers, particle physicists, these kinds of people, like they don't think what's impressive, they don't think that what we think is impressive is impressive. And that was an interesting feature to me, both today and just at large in your work, is like turning and looking and photographing something that everyone else had forgotten to see. Like the radioactive barrels today was one of those. Like we got in the elevator and turned around, and there's a stack of barrels that say radioactive material on it. And so everyone sets up for a quick photograph, right? And everyone in the elevator is like, oh, please don't take, the photos of the garbage. I wonder if some of the things in the photographs are happenstance, or if how much of the stuff in the photograph is happenstance like that.
Not that much. Like a lot of the times, the places I photograph, the people that work there, they are really proud of what they're doing, and they do think it's amazing, but they don't think so for the same reason as me. So they understand a lot better what is happening in the place, and that is a level of understanding that I don't really understand. So I'm kind of amazed by their understanding and the fact that they work there and the fact that they understand it. But the things that I choose to take pictures of,
I've usually got a pretty good idea of what it is in that place I'm going into that I want to take a picture of. And then, of course, sometimes I find things. But the things that I find, the things that I want to take pictures of, they're things that have to have some kind of meaning to that tell some kind of story. Because I could take pictures of, abstract pictures of like the corner of the ceiling that look really beautiful and the light is beautiful and stuff like that. But if there's no story behind it, then I kind of end up kicking it out. So I need to be able to talk about what it is that's happening in this picture, and that it means something more than maybe what you're seeing. And some places I go to, and it's really easy to photograph because I just walk in and I can see the thing that I want to photograph. It's just there, like this, for instance. It was laid out like that, and as soon as I got there, I was like, that's the angle. I mean, I just have to stand there and set the camera up and press the button. That's it. It was a bit more complicated because it was actually really dark and they were all moving. So there was some technical stuff I had to figure out. But the composition and what I wanted to photograph was there. But sometimes I come into a place and I have I can see what it is that I like, but I can't see how to capture it in a picture. So I have to really work hard. It's like tiring in my head. I have to use kind of all my power to tease this picture out because I can't get the machine that I want in the angle that I want it with the light that I want it. And no matter how much I make it work, I want to make it work, I can't make it work. So I have to get creative and start to experience living in this room to get what I can out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I got another maybe facet to take up, but I wanna prime the audience in a way we wanna field questions from you as well. So we got at least one more place to go, maybe, hopefully, and then we want to hear from you. If that makes sense. Okay, so I think another theme worth talking about in the work, which I think you did an amazing job of outlining what the work's up to on a lot of
changes quite a lot, by the way. Like this year, those were my themes, and then I can kind of next year I'm thinking something else about how I feel about my work. It's changing all the time.
Yeah. Well, I think let me throw one out for consideration, and that would be one of scale, one of extreme difference in scale. So on the one hand, you photograph things that we might file as immense, just impossibly huge and immense. So the infrastructure, massive science experiments, airplane manufacturing, ships, buildings, immensity. And then on the other hand, the intensely personal or human scale. So the body, for instance, food, rocks, plants, sex toys, in some cases.
Oh, it's over now. That was the slideshow. I didn't put it on with you.
And yet there seems to be a strong resonance between those scales all the time. Right? We can see shoe manufacturing, pig slaughter on an incredibly massive and gargantuan scale, and relate it back immediately to just the viscerality of the human body. So the photograph, just to throw out one example among others, the photograph of the robots hanging versus the slaughterhouse photo. Those are worth comparing to each other, just in a kind of scalar fashion. And I wonder if you ever think about scale, or if that's a thing that registers in the work for you, how big it is or how personally small it is. Another photograph that you didn't screen today, but that I really quite love, is seeing it's a sex worker talking to a camera through a door frame. That one's a really intimate photograph in a very small scale, but it's also striking and poignant. So
yeah, it's definitely something I think about. I mean, I really like the contrast between the big scale and the smaller scale, and it's also a way for me to hopefully not have the pictures get too samey, or I need to have some kind of differences between them, and scale is like one of the things that I do, and also the contrast between like I started out with the CERN picture and then the sausage factory, this kind of the thinking on on a scale that only the most clever people in the world can understand, and then like the most mundane things that people don't even think about. There's like, I need those kind of contrasts to make the work more interesting, I think.
Yeah, that one was flipping the adage on its head, like wanting to know how the sausage is made, no matter what the sausage is, right? So like if it's existential questions about the creation of life, or if it's about literal sausage, like you're the person who wants to know how the sausage is made.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty interesting to see how sausage is made. I also really like that show, like How It's Made or whatever it's called. I mean, when I started out doing this, I just watched loads of that. I love it. I mean, I watch it with my kids now. You know, it's just like, okay, this is how bubblegum is made. Great. It's like 10 minutes well spent. So, yeah, I'm interested in both the reality of like how things are made, and also, like I say, like I want, you know, I could also take pictures of a sausage factory that showed the process, but you know the light wasn't very good and the composition wasn't very good, but it shows what it is. But I don't want to do that. I want to make it. I want to show how amazing the sausage factory is by making it look amazing as well.
Yeah. Okay, should we open it up? Carl's got a question.
I think I found a way to make what I really want to ask sound smart and intellectual. But thank you for one of the most architectural lectures I've ever seen. So in a way, I'm seeing your photographs as sausage, and I see very rhetorically, I want, when engaging your work, to understand how you're making the sausage of the photograph, right? Like to me, I can't help but understand, even when you're not here telling the story, that there is a story there, right? Like, I can't help but wonder about the access and how it was made, and if we were to flip the camera 180 degrees, what your world would look like. So I'm curious about your attitude there, about your humanity and bodily presence in these photographs. Specifically, I notice that your vertical lines tend to be straight. And it's a world that we inhabit, those of us who do digital modeling. We're acutely aware of vertical foreshortening, and it's something that's present in architectural photography, architectural historical photography. There's a checkbox in our most popular software to keep vertical lines straight. And I notice, I interpret that as a kind of sensitivity to the neutrality of the space, right? The perspective holds the space of the photograph in a way that seems to undermine you were there as a human in a point of view, and yet I can't help but like wonder about how you as the photographer got to that point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm with you.
But in other words, like I really want to, and related, there's a lot of depth where it seems like everything's in focus, right? So like, can you indulge my like interest in the craft of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when I told you that I started getting into photography and I bought like all these old film cameras and everything was all sorts. I tried everything, and as soon as I had that light bulb moment where like this is what I'm going to do, I packed away my film cameras and bought a digital camera, and I just knew I had to go like full color, and I had to make it kind of like make these places come to life somehow. And it was like an experimental process in the beginning to figure out like, right, how do I do this? I think one of the first places I went to was like an offset printer, a tiny little one. And I think I just spent a whole day photographing like lines and stuff, and what am I doing here? And the thing with the vertical lines was just one of the first things that it became a rule that this is the lines have to be vertical, unless there are exceptions. There should always be exceptions, but in general, the lines are always straight. And you're right about the neutrality, because I don't necessarily want people to think about where I am. I'm not really in the photo. I'm not there. I'm trying to show it from a kind of a neutral point where you can see as much as I want to show you in the picture, without getting involved with like too much stuff in the foreground and background, and I do work also on, you know, like trying to keep as much in focus as possible. My style isn't having like a, you know, one thing in focus and a really blurry background. It's not how I work. I work with a tripod most of the time, not all the time, and that kind of slows down the framing. So getting the framing right is something that is like, you've got to put it and you've got to adjust it like to millimeters, and then like 1 centimeter this way and 1 centimeter this way, and that process of kind of having the camera as like a fixed point, for me is like is pretty important, because as soon as I've got it in my hands and I'm like, it's changing, the whole perspective is changing all the time. I don't know if that answered your question. Yeah, I do. I mean, it's almost, no matter how hard I try, there's always something which is just a little bit off. So yeah, I straighten lines and I straighten them, but yeah. And actually, this is a really bad example, because I was actually looking at this picture, and as I was making the presentation, I noticed that I'd never noticed before. There's actually a little bit more. There's a little bit of a tilt in that line. Which I'm kind of like, oh, is that? And I thought, I could fix that right now. And then part of me thought, no, I'm going to leave it, because maybe it's all right to have a little bit of imperfection at the moment. But yeah, I do straighten the lines, but I also try to do it within reason. So I wouldn't take a picture like this of a building and then try and straighten it, because it's just going to look terrible. So I only do things which are going to kind of, they're like tweaks, I would say.
Okay, so I have the next question, and it's a good follow after Carl's, but it was not prompted by your question. I came specifically to ask this question, but it's so similar, but it's different. So I noticed that in so many, and not the majority, but in almost the majority of your photographs, there's clear symmetry. There's also a very spatial framing that's essentially one-point perspectives. So I was really curious to hear you explain how, you know, you say you look for the right shot. How does it end up so similar that way?
How does it end up so similar?
Or symmetrical. I mean, you gravitate towards symmetry, clearly.
I think it's just very natural for me to get that symmetrical. That's just a little. Hey, relax, everyone. Relax, calm down.
Let go.
That's my reminder. I'll start the slideshow again. I don't know how to make it repeat. So. Oh wait, yes I can. Luke's slideshow. Okay. No, it's like totally. You know, when I said I was, you know, I went to that offset printer and just took pictures of everything. As soon as I started to go into these places, the place I would gravitate towards was the symmetrical one. And in a way, it's like a bit of a cheap shot, because it's always like a strong, you always get a strong picture out of it. You get like a strong graphic. And there are times when I do it and the thing that I'm photographing isn't important enough that it's more the symmetry that is more important than the thing I'm photographing, you know? So it could be like, a corridor or something, right? Where it's in a place that's not that special. Then I think to myself, okay, now I'm just doing it because it's easy. And then I try to push myself in another direction. But usually it is, for me, it's just like a strong shot. I'm also, you know, I love Stanley Kubrick. And he was not afraid of using symmetry, and if he can do it, I can also do it. So
Yeah, and also Owen Wilson. I mean, that's.
yeah. Owen Wilson?
Or
I don't know. I'm not sure I know him. I'm not sure I know who Owen Wilson is.
no.
Isn't he an act-
makes all his films.
Ah, right. Okay. Is he the cinematographer?
No,
Okay.
the cinematographer, not
Right.
Owen Wilson.
All right. Okay.
Oh, who's next?
Thank you so much for your presentation. I just had a question about your use of language with your photography. Specifically, maybe the hierarchy that you use in your book. You've chosen to index your image captions, but yet you've pulled out certain quotes. So I just was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit more, why you chose to separate language and image and then chose specifically some quotes to pair with it.
Yeah, I think it's because I want there to be several different layers. So, like the first is just the picture. It should be a good picture. If it's not a good picture, then there's no point in continuing. So you got what I hope is like I've taken a nice picture, and then there's more and more you can find out about what this story is about. And I'm happy kind of wherever people want to stop along that process. If they're happy to find out, like, okay, it's a textile mill, it's in England, it's a nice picture, it's got symmetry, move on, that's fine. But if they want to find out more about this story, about what it is, I want to give them that opportunity. So that's why in the book I did it like this with this, and then with the titles, and then I put like detailed captions at the back, so that if you're interested, you can go and find out more about it. Because I always, when I get photo books, I like to find out as much as I can about what's going on. But at the same time, if I in the book, for example, if I put a big load of text next to that picture, it weighs it down. It distracts from the picture, I think. So, when you're doing an exhibition, you can print the picture this big, and you can put text about the picture like that big that kind of says everything I want to say. Then that works fine. But in a book, the text is going to take up like half the page, and then I think it distracts from the picture. So,
Thank you.
I hope that answers.
Could you talk a little bit more about your process and how you kind of build the story? Is it you ask questions from the people in the facilities, or do you kind of construct them, or how do you gather that information?
So a lot of the time, when I go to places, I haven't seen really any pictures from inside, or I've seen some kind of dodgy pictures on the internet that don't really. And I can see there's some potential there, but I can't see exactly what it is I'm going to get. But I know before I'm going that there's something interesting in this place, and there's something that has a story. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be going there. But everything has a story. So and that's one of the great things about being a photographer, is that I can just choose any subject that I think is interesting and say, I'm going to go and find out about that, and then have an excuse to go into these places and find out about it. So normally I would go to the place, and the pictures that I take would be the thing that kind of dictates how I want to tell the story, because I don't want to fill out a series. These are like individual pictures, but a lot of the time they're taken from a series that I did about this place. So when I go to a place, I'm looking for one picture that I can use in a book or an exhibition that goes along with my, the theme that I'm working on, and only one. That's if I get one picture and then I'm from a location, then I'm really happy. But I also want to make a story about this place, because I also get these stories published in magazines and stuff. So I send them out when I've been there and say, hey, I visited this place and there's a story about it, and here's a series of pictures. And I would interview the people that work there, and often I won't have an idea of what the angle of the story is. I just think it's cool. I think, hey, this is cool. I'm here. I'm in this factory. It's cool. what's the story? And then I will interview somebody that is like in charge, the person that's in charge, and I'll record what they say and get it typed up and make a story out of it.
Thank you.
That all your frames has a same ratio, and I realize that there are certain rules that you follow that you actually create. Is that part of the rule, or is there like any photograph that actually starts to extend more of that ratio?
Yes. Okay. The first question, I like to work as simply as possible, and so when I started out, I had one camera with one zoom lens, and that was it. I couldn't, when you're climbing up ladders and you're like hanging off cranes and stuff, and like you're working in these places that are really dusty, I hate changing lenses. Like there are some photographers that say, oh, you have to have like the 35 millimeter, and then you have to have the 85, and I'm like, I just buy the best zoom lens that I can, so that I don't need to think about focal length at all. So I just use the tools that I think that mean that I don't need to make decisions about that kind of thing. Because otherwise, I found that the more equipment that you have, the more decisions you have to make about how you're using it and what it's going to do. And now my kit bag is way bigger than it used to be. Like I have several lenses, I have lights, I've got loads of crap that I need, because I've kind of taken a decision at every step that, okay, now I've mastered this one lens and this camera, and if I got this extra piece of equipment, it's going to help me get to a little bit further to where I want to go, and so all the equipment that I have now is like stuff that I think is helping me make better pictures. But in the beginning, I think I actually bought tons of gear on like a couple of shoots, and was just freaked out by what light should I use now, and which modifier should I put on the light. And as soon as you start stressing about that kind of thing in the middle of a photo shoot, then you're just wasting like creative energy. So that was the first question, and the second one was about the ratios. Yeah, I cropped to 4:5 pretty much everything, and that is because I just like I like the ratio of it. I think when it gets wider, then it can feel like a little bit like snapshotty, or a little bit like too wide angle. It's just something with my eyes. I like the ratio. It works, but I like the idea that I can change things. So I make rules, but I'll always maybe next year I will decide to do it differently. I wouldn't rule that out.
Well, I think that's because like I'm just like really curious like what that extension might be, just by looking at that achievement.
So like what's on the outside of the image? That kind of brings me up with curiosity. Okay, well maybe that's good, because I don't want to show you what's on what's being cropped out. Yeah. Yeah, well, I'm very obsessive about my cropping, exactly where I'm going to draw the line of what I show and what I don't show. So, maybe I'll show you later. If we go for a beer, if you buy me a few beers, I'll show you. I'll put the crop tool, and I'll show you what's on the outside. No. No. But there are subjects that I've explored, but not got access to, or not got where. I would say the question is, the difficult thing is, I also work as a commercial photographer, so I also get hired by companies to go into some of these places, and often, and I don't separate the commercial with the art if I can avoid it, because I like this mixture of, like, I'm lucky to get hired to do what I do because of what I do, and so I don't need to go after what is that they want me to do. They just usually want me to do what I do in their factory, and that gets me access to places that I couldn't get into otherwise. You know, I work for Google, and I've got into a lot of Google data centers that, like, no one can get into, especially with a camera. You can't, you know, it's just you can't do it, and I've got in there because of that. So I would say the taboo area of what if there's something that I won't photograph, maybe has more to do with, like, getting paid to do it. If there are industries or companies that want to pay me to do it, where I would really have to think about if that is something I want to do or not. I'm not particularly interested in things that are really depressing, or, like, really gory or bloody, or like I think my work is like an exploration of, like, human eccentricity, and it's like a celebration of all of these crazy things that humans come up with, and when there can be humor involved, or there can be a debate about whether this is good or bad or right or wrong, then I'm interested in it to a long extent. But when it gets to things that there's no humorous side, or it's just too depressing, then I'm probably, like, not that interested in it. And there are other photographers that do those subjects really well. So I'm not particularly interested in going into a war zone, for instance, or like a famine in Africa. Yeah. Thank you.